Hi, it's Corrine, and I'm here today with another page in my Smash book. I'm using the Maudeville book by Close to My Heart. It is their My Crush series, and I'm just trying to find a page that I want to use. And here I'm using a glassine bag from Panda Express. It was clean, so I saved it knowing that I would use it in my Smash book at some point. And I didn't want the pocket to be so long and take up too much of the page, so I just folded it over and glued it down to about the size that I wanted. And off camera, I pre-measured the bag and cut out a couple tags, which you'll see here in a minute. And I'm going to be dyeing some Hug Snug seam binding, so I want to do that now to give it a chance to dry while I'm working on the rest of the page. So here I'm taking a little bit of water and just spraying it. That way it absorbs easily with the color shine. I'm using Heidi Swap's Color Shine in teal, which will match the paper that I'll be using. So I'm spraying that very well, and then I'm just going to rub it around the mat to absorb the rest that's still on the mat. And I'm using a cookie sheet mat from Walmart in their kitchen section. It's just like the Ranger nonstick mat. It's huge. I cut that down. And now I'm going to use a baby wipe to just kind of clean my hands, and I'll also use the baby wipe to clean off that nonstick mat. Sometimes I take it to my sink to clean it as well. So I'm using some Prima flowers in white, and I sprayed them to match the seam binding. And now I'll just wipe up the rest of the seam binding with what's on the mat. And I'm setting these aside for a second to clean up, and then I will also take my heat gun to them to help start the drying process. I don't fully dry them, I just got most of it so they weren't too wet. And then, like I said, I'll set those aside to work on the rest of the page. I'm using a scrap piece of paper and an EK Success circle punch in a 1/2 inch. I pre-cut my tags using the Heidi Swap Sugar Sheet collection, and that stamp down there that says Heart This is an Allie Edwards stamp. So now I'm using that circle that I cut out to um, use it as like a whole reinforcement. Not so much to reinforce it, but just more for looks. So I'll set that aside and let that dry before I place a hole in the middle of it. My photos I printed myself, and I purposely left a white border around them. And they're weird sizes, but again, I chose the size based on the size of the tag, and I chose the size of the tag based on that glassine bag. So the photos are 3 1/8 by 4.5. That tag is 4.5 by 8.5. And the tag that's going to sit on top is 3 3/4 by 7 1/4. Again, those were just random sizes just so they fit inside that bag. And here's a little bit of journaling that I use the same sugar sheet collection. I'm just cutting it down a little. This was my great niece that we got to see for the first time. They just moved from New York, and she's a sweetheart. And that's a picture of her with my husband and my sister's horse. She went over there with them to see the horses. So here I'm using my big bite to place a hole in both the tags. I just lined it up where I want that top tag to sit on the bottom tag and placed a hole in it. I'm using a doily that I got from the dollar store, and this is some white satin ribbon. And here is a gorgeous piece of lace from Craft Supplies One. It's actually a doily, and I had cut it up for another project, so I'm using some of the leftover. And I started to adhere this ribbon down with my hot glue gun, but it was easier just to use the ATG gun to line it up straight to finish it. And I wrap that around the back and cut off the excess. And then I'm placing a piece of Scotch tape just to make sure it doesn't come off. This is again from Craft Supplies 1. It's some flat back pearls, super pretty. So I'm adding them to the top and the bottom where I think they'll be seen. In the middle there, the doily will be covering that part. So here I'm just showing you up close that pearl trim. And that's that doily. Gorgeous. I cut it in half here so it sticks out on the top and then on the bottom right of the doily, adhering it with some hot glue. This is gauze, straight from my first aid kit. I have a ton of it. So instead of, I wanted cheesecloth, but I figured I might as well use what I have at home. So I'm just kind of stretching it out to fray it. And again, cutting it in half and placing it over the lace. I just wanted to add a little bit more texture and dimension to this. So I'm just cutting off the ends there so I'm left with just the frayed part. And I'll adhere that as well with my hot glue gun. I'm using an Aleene's glue gun that I got from Michael's. It comes with several different tips and I used a coupon for that. I get asked about that all the time. I highly, highly recommend that glue gun. So here are some leaves that I cut out from my Cameo. I usually cut out a bunch of them and then just save them for when I want to add them to a project. So now I'm just deciding on how I want my flowers to lay. And again, these are Prima flowers that I got from Hobby Lobby. Here are stamens that I cut out from, again, the Cameo. That foam pad that you see in the back I got from Joann's years ago in their stamp department where they sell their stamps and inks. It's just a foam pad and it makes it nice for when you stamp on it. It gives you a great impression. So I'm using my stylus and just rubbing the middle of those to make them stand up. And now I will stack two of them together and add them to my flower centers using hot glue. And I have hot glue strings kind of everywhere, so I'll show you how I get rid of those in a minute. Here are some pearls that I got from Saw Crafters quite a while ago. So I'm going to use one in the large flower, and I have a half back pearl in teal for the second flower. So there I'm just showing you a close-up of what we have so far. And now I will add in those leaves. I cut them out of pattern paper, but I also have a couple of vellum ones that I'll be adding as well. This page probably took me not long to make. I would say about 35-40 minutes, and that's with cutting out the tags and printing out my photos ahead of time. Here I'm showing you some flowers that I got from Craft Supplies 1. These are the white flowers, super pretty flowers, and they're small, so they worked well on this project. And again, from Craft Supplies 1, I'm pulling out some pink flowers. I wanted to add a little color in there, and I left the wires on the bottom so I could twist them up. I love the look of that. Sometimes if you want, you can cut them all the way off. Sometimes I do, but I usually like to leave them on. Again, just gives it a little bit more dimension. That's a flower I had in my stash, a rose. and some pearl spray. I'm not sure where I've had those for years. I had a huge stack, so I'm not sure where I got those from, but pulled those out of my stash and tucking them under the flowers. I wanted this to be a very feminine page, as you can tell. So now once I had my flowers where I wanted them, I'm just adding a little bit of hot glue. And now I'm taking my heat tool to just get rid of any little hot glue strings. They just kind of disappear. I think I do that again at the end as well. And now I'm using my Hug Snug seam binding to tie a bow in the top. And I actually tie two bows. I just wanted it to be a little bit fuller. I untied it there because I didn't want to waste any of that, so I used less. I pulled it down so I wasn't wasting any, didn't have to cut as much off. So I'll trim off the ends and then tie another bow and add that to the middle of that bow. Again, just to give it some fullness. And as you can see, Heidi Swap's color shine matches perfect with her paper there. Now I'm pulling out some charms that I received again from Craft Supplies One. These are super cute charms. I'm using a clock charm and a little heart key charm. They just went so well on that page. And I'm adhering those with some E6000. I will add E6000 and then a little bit of hot glue. The hot glue will allow it to stick immediately, which gives the E6000 a little time to dry. With E6000, it usually takes for you to be certain that it's dry about 24 hours, but after about a half hour, it's pretty dry. Again, just using some Hug Snug to form a bow, and I will make two bows here and again do the exact same thing, adhere them on top of each other. Again, just showing you an up close view. And now as I'm going to put it back in my book, I'm changing my mind on the page that I want to use. I love the combination with that, but I also didn't want it to stand out as much. So I used the page on the right, and now I'll use a paint sample, and I thought it matched so great with the page on the left, so I tied in the color on the right and just stuck it behind there. Again, using ATG to adhere that down. And I wanted to off-center my bag a little, skew it a little bit. So I'm adding some Miracle tape from Viva Las Vegas Stamps. It's a very strong tape. And then I decided I wanted to add a couple more flat back pearls. So that is it. I will give you an up close look again of the page along with some pictures to follow. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram at Corenescreations. Thanks for watching.